This is going to be a review for a Chapter 2, mid-Chapter 2 test. It's going to cover 4 sections, 2.1 through 2.4. So we're going to look at some not so randomly selected problems from your homeworks. So we'll start with section 2.1. This is your practice A. You want to describe a pattern in the numbers and write the next number in the pattern. So you have a sequence here, 2, 6, 8, 54. It looks like it's increasing. Is it increasing by the same amount every time? It doesn't seem to be. So it's probably not addition. Maybe it's multiplication. Could you multiply by the same number every time? Hopefully you recognize this is a pattern where you multiply the previous term by 3. So how do you get the next term in the sequence? You're going to do 54 times 3. Which will give you 162. Test tomorrow is multiple choice. So there will be 4 options on each question where you have to identify the pattern and the next term. Remember in class we did a problem like this, kind of stumped us. Remember your operations, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. Well, you could also use exponents, and that's what we used on this one, if you remember. This was actually 1 cubed, 2 cubed, 3 cubed, 4 cubed, so on and so forth. 1 cubed is 1, 2 cubed is 8, 3 cubed is 27. 4 cubed is 64. So the next term in the sequence for this one is 5 cubed, which would be 125. So that would be your answer to this one. So there's a few questions on inductive reasoning. We spent a good bit of time on section 2.2 because it was basically all new information. It's on conditional statements. So a lot of these questions are going to cover multiple questions on the test tomorrow. If you want 2 statements to mean the same thing, you would use this template, if you can recall. If blue, then red. That means the same thing as red if blue. The reason those mean the same thing is, notice how if is attached to the blue, your hypothesis. You could also take if and then out altogether and say all or every blue, red. So that's what we're doing here. Rewrite the conditional in if-then form. So you want to make it look like this. So they're going to give you one of these 2, and you have to make it look like this. And again, there's not going to be any writing on the test. It's multiple choice. It is time for dinner if it is 6 p.m. Do yourself the favor and identify the hypothesis. Remember, hypothesis comes after the word if. Then you can identify the conclusion. Notice how I did not put any color on the word if. If is not part of the hypothesis or the conclusion. So if I want to change it to an if-then statement, now I'm going to say if blue, then red. And it's really easy for me to do since I already made them the right colors. So your answer is if blue, then red. So here's your answer. If it is 6 p.m., then it is time for dinner. So we turned this second form into the first form. Number 4, the car runs when there is gas in the tank. Notice how there is no if and there is no then. Identify your hypothesis and the conclusion, and then turn it into a conditional statement. If blue, then red. If the car runs, then there's gas in the tank. That's all you do. This is an important skill. Making statements mean the same thing. So there's going to be a few questions on that. If we flip back to part A, for each statement, write the if-then form, then the converse, inverse, and contrapositive, and indicate whether each statement is true or false. Now, I picked this one on purpose because it's short, so I don't have to write a whole bunch. So that's nice, but remember, you don't have to write anything. It's multiple choice. When it rains, it pours. I'm identifying hypothesis and conclusion. This statement is like this one. There's no if, there's no then. So what you need to do is write the statement. So there is an if and a then. So this would be your if-then form. If it rains, then it pours. You would need to identify that statement. That's just what we did in the last section. Now, is this true or false? If it rains, does it pour? Not necessarily. It could sprinkle. So that would be a counterexample. And they didn't say to identify a counterexample in this section, but on your test, they are going to give you conditional statements that are false. So they're going to ask you to provide a counterexample, and this would be a great counterexample to provide. So on the test, when it says, what's a counterexample to this, you could say it could be raining, but it could be sprinkling, not pouring. Those are two different things. So you only need one counterexample to prove that something is false, and that's what we did here. Okay, so back to this question. You also need the converse. Now remember, the converse is the same thing as these. The converse does not have to mean the same thing as these. So if it rains, then it pours. That's your if-then statement. Well, if you want the converse, you're switching the red and the blue, but your if and then stay where they are. That's why it doesn't always mean the same thing. So the converse would be if it pours, then it rains. That's a true statement. If it pours, then it rains. Inverse. Remember, you negate the if-then statement. So you would say, if not blue, then not red. So the inverse looks like this. If it doesn't rain, then it doesn't pour. That's how you correctly write an inverse. And you're going to have to do that on the test. Is it true or false? Remember, converse and inverse mean the same thing. This is true. If it doesn't rain, then it doesn't pour. That's a true statement. Contrapositive is the negation of the converse. So this says, if red, then blue. Your contrapositive is going to say, if not red, then not blue. So if it doesn't pour, then it doesn't rain. If-then statement and contrapositive mean the same thing. So if this is false, we know this is false as well. So this one exercise, number 7, used a lot of skills, and there's going to be a lot of questions on the test on these skills that we just talked about. These are related conditionals. You got to write each one of them or identify it on a multiple choice test. If it's false, you better give a counterexample. You better know what means the same thing. That kind of thing.